I added another book to the HD books. It's now Stephen King, The Langoliers, because I'm very pleased to introduce Victor Mazin to you, who will deliver his lecture, which is called The Wholes and the Real, Lacan and Langoliers. So Victor Mazin, as you already had heard, he has co-conceived the conference with us, and he's a member of our advisory board of the Freud Museum. But not only that, he is, and this is interesting, he is the founder of the Freud's Dream Museum in St. Petersburg, which was founded in November 25 years ago. In November, when we celebrate the 125th birthday of the interpretation of dreams, so it was 100 years after that you founded this museum. And Victor is also an honorary member of the Museum of Jurassic Technology in Los Angeles. Then he's the head of the Department of Theoretical Psychoanalysis at the East European Institute of Psychoanalysis in St. Petersburg. And he is an associate professor at the Department of Liberal Arts and Science of St. Petersburg State University. And he is also an honorary professor at the Institute of Depth Psychology in Kiev. He is also a translator from English and French into Russian, and he was the editor-in-chief of the Cabinet Journal and member of the editorial boards of the journals Psychoanalysis in Kiev, European Journal of Psychoanalysis, Rome, and Transmission in Sheffield, and the Journal for Lacanian Studies in London. He has published many articles and books on psychoanalysis, deconstruction, cinema and visual arts, and also in the before mentioned catalogue of the permanent exhibition of the museum, as well as in the catalogue of the which you find downstairs in German on the Kunsthalle Tübingen exhibition on Freud and the arts. There are 2 articles by Victor Mazin. We are extremely happy that you could come from St. Petersburg to Vienna. We haven't seen for a longer time, as you can imagine. And so please join me in a warm welcome for Victor.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for the good words and for bringing me here. And I'm a little bit worried for my English language, which I didn't use for the last 5 years. But I hope that I will be understandable and more or less at least clear. And I'm also very happy to see my students even in this auditorium. And this is fantastic for me. That was the biggest surprise yesterday and now, and from Kiev and from St. Petersburg. And actually, I will be talking about my experience connected with the Faculty of Liberal Science and Arts in St. Petersburg. And it'll be 3 parts in my talk. The first part is the experience, and then 2 other parts, one with the help of Stephen King and the other one with Jacques Lacan, as train of thoughts which came to my mind after the very unusual experience which happened exactly 2 years ago. So I will start from this experience, but beforehand I would like also to recollect you that this is a Freudian way of presenting things. I mean, I believe that I follow Freudian tradition, analyzing not my. I'm also a practicing analyst, but I prefer not to present the cases because I am myself my own case. So, so I start from one weird experience. And also, I think I'm bringing us back to the morning session. Somehow, you will hear lots of intersections. And also one more word before I start with this experience, that I'm probably thinking mostly how to get rid of paranoia. And for me, the most important book at the moment is Anti-Oedipus by Deleuze and Guattari. And I try to follow a little bit another way, or to ask myself, is schizophrenia is the only one way out of paranoia? And my preliminary thought is that maybe melancholy would be another way out of paranoia. So I'm somehow in between melancholy and paranoia, and it was also one of the biggest surprise for me that when we conceived with Jean and Daniela this conference on absence, I didn't think that it would be so much on melancholy. So for me, it's a very good surprise, I would say. So now I could come to tell you about the experience which happened exactly 2 years ago when I come to the university at September 2022, and I have felt absence for the first time in my life for real. And this is important because I refer now already to real in Lacanian sense. So I came to university department where I worked for more than 20 years. And instead of my friends and colleagues, I have found holes. All of a sudden, people have disappeared. It was a horrible surprise for me. I started to ask, where is this friend of mine, my colleague? And because it was absolutely unexpected for me not to see so many good friends of mine. So that was the experience of this absence for real and discovery of the holes instead of the people. And the second point, which is crucial for me also, it was not only people who disappeared, but the places of these people too. There is a proverb which we use very often in Russian. Perhaps it's in English also important. The proverb says, "A holy place is never empty." So that was the discovery, the absence of the places themselves. And I recollect at this moment my favorite writer, who is Daniel Paul Schreber. And Schreber explained that God doesn't know the very important thing. And this thing is that to exist, humans need a place to exist. First comes the place and then humans. And afterwards, I discovered the same idea at Lacan. But sometimes I have to share the idea, but very often I think that Schreber was a teacher of Lacan. Lots of Lacanian ideas are coming from the memoirs by Daniel Paul Schreber. So Lacan is also saying that there is no such thing as the beginning. There is no beginning of the beginning. The beginning is always the place, and then comes the beginning only afterwards. So my space was in disorder, and more precisely, parts of the space were crushed. They were absent. The symbolic matrix was collapsed, and there was a hole in the place of the other, of the big other. It was about the holes. It was for real about the real in Lacanian sense. I was about the absence. It was about the absence, but not about the absence as a part of symbolic game of absence and presence. So it was not at all about for that game. So it was not that sort of absence. That's why I'm not talking probably any longer about absence, because it was about the wholes. So then two trains of thoughts came to my mind, and the first was exactly about Langoliers, the novel which I read many years ago, but that was the first association with my experience. If to ask myself why, the answer would be because it was something really deeply oral, because I was feeling that the space was eaten away. That was the feeling. It's not just crashed, it's not just disappeared, but it was like some being, something, or somebody was eating this space slowly. And at the moment I have recollected King's Langolier, and the horror in this novel, I recollect you, starts from the moment when the people in the play, they vanished. And it was very weird situation, because everyone who was awake has vanished, and everyone who was in sleep, in the state of sleep, everyone who was dreaming stayed, let's say, just survived. Yeah, I was thinking about Langoliers, these imaginary beings devouring the world, and I found a quotation from Stephen King. Huge sections of the world, huge irregular pieces of reality itself were falling into the ground like freight elevators, leaving big, senseless chunks of emptiness behind. They are eating the world. My God, my dear God, they are eating the world. So that was exactly this oral metaphor which was so important for me. And when I started to reread the novel, I discovered some ideas about some sort of cannibals who were keep on eating the space. I couldn't visualize them. This is very important for me also. Maybe we will talk together afterwards, but it was not any image, it was not imagery. And in Stephen King's novel, at some point, Stephen King, he describes these Langoliers, but in fact, first of all, and many pages are dedicated to the sound of this cannibal army. It's also kind of a quote from the novel. So it was kind of oral cannibalistic picture, and it was at the same time not a picture at all. It was an acoustic phenomenon. It was the sound of the symbolic matrix falling apart. One could say that experience was purely oral, the sound of devouring space. Sounds belong to the same oral phase. And in this novel, it's very important and interesting that just two beings on the plane, they know about the Langoliers. These two people, one of them is a paranoiac, whom the father specially invented these creatures when he was, his name is Craig Toomey. When he was a kid, his father was teaching him that if he would be a lazy boy, then Langoliers would come and eat him. And the other person who knows about the Langoliers is a blind girl whose name is Dinah. And when I was rereading the novel, I also recollected one point of Lacanian ideas when Lacan refers blindness to the real also. So these two characters, they know about the Langoliers, and when somebody is saying, well, Langoliers don't exist, this is paranoid delirium, in reality, there is no such beings as Langoliers. This blind girl, Dinah, she says, maybe once it was make-believe, but not anymore. Now it's for real. So the paranoid and the blind girl, they know. Blind girl knows, and as I mentioned already, Lacan and the purloined letters refers the blindness to the real. So this idea of space to be devoured, or the sound of the being devoured in the space, of course, was once again I repeat that it was non-representational representation, and to my mind it belongs to the melancholic spectrum, because there is no image. It's also a Lacanian idea. I could remind you or share with you now the idea of melancholy as in a way imageless. So a melancholic is coming through the mirrors, trying to reach an object A. So I mentioned the cannibalism, and of course with a reference to Karl Abraham, but at the same time it was not cannibalism in a sense of preserving a beloved person. It was not connected to love, to the idea of an incorporation. It mostly was annihilation. I understand that when we try to keep someone by incorporating her or him, we also kind of annihilate it. But for me, it's dialectics, so I split it up to different ways of different ways of devouring the other. And also, it was not only about the space. I was talking until this moment about the space only, but also the idea came to my mind that these Langoliers are trying to devour memory, or drilling the holes in the human minds to destroy the succession of time. There is no more past, present, and the future. Actually, it was not a joke. I was talking to August Rust beforehand, and I said that I'm really sometimes confused in time, because the time itself like destroyed, or I don't feel lots of holes in my mind actually, but as for the blackout, this is already not a metaphor nowadays. And also continuing the idea which appeared in the paper before, that space is of course connected with time. Another phrase which was coming to me like every other day was the most famous from Hamlet, probably, the time is out of joint. So it was not only holes in space, but also holes in minds, and also holes in time. It was not surprising because 2 years before that, I started already to feel that something is going really very wrong with time, and the two ideas came together: the time is out of joint, and the collapse of the symbolic matrix. So it's clear that if somebody is devouring the space, that in the result the symbolic matrix has collapsed. And in Stephen King's novel, there is a moment also when they speak about the probability of disappearance, not only of the space but of time as well. So I found this moment, and this is the quotation, I think it's about time, Bob said quietly, not about dimension, as Albert suggested, but time. Suppose that every now and then a hole appears in the time stream, not a time warp, but a time rip, a rip in the temporal fabric. So my experience was connected with the holes, and my first train of thought brought me to Stephen King novel, and then probably comes the analysis, or I started to try to understand this idea of holes through Lacanian writings. And I immediately discovered that there are so many holes in Lacan. I'm sorry for the ambiguity I'm saying now. There are many, many holes in Lacanian teaching, but I mean there are very, very many different conceptualization of an idea of a whole in Lacan. And even in 10th seminar, he is saying that whole in the real is just a name for Hegel's negativity. So there are very many holes, and it's not an absence, as I mentioned already, also because you can't really make positivization of a whole. And thank you very much, Monica, for the holes at the place where the carpet near the Freudian couch was. So it was also, so but maybe I see holes now everywhere, I don't know. Well, but they are there. Well, it was not my hallucination, you mean, truly it was a hole. So I followed I followed the Lacanian holes, and the first idea, which was very, how shall I put it, easy, or the subject itself is a whole in Lacanian teaching. That's the principle, maybe idea. That's the first idea. It was not new for me, and because a subject in Lacanian teaching is a signifier which represents a subject to another signifier. So the subject itself, herself, himself is under the bar, and the subject, where the subject is represented, there is a whole. It might be said like this. And I found a quotation from Lacan, very beautiful actually, when he says, the problem is that the entry of the signifier into the real, and to see how from this the subject is born. Does it mean that if we find ourselves, as it were, before a sort of descent of the spirit, the apparition of the winged signifier would begin to make their holes in the real all by themselves, in the midst of which there would appear one of these holes, which would be the subject. So one point was clear for me in the very beginning, that in this study of holes, maybe it's a new discipline, new subject, I mean, whole studies, or whole, I don't know how else should I call it. There's so many holes in Lacanian teaching, you can't imagine actually. I might say that Lacan is a theoretician of holes. Holes are everywhere in his teaching, and they intersect all the most important notions of psychoanalysis. And for me, it was partly a discovery, because I was always paying attention to another notion, which is béance in French, or a gap in English. But this is not the same as a whole. So there are very many different holes in his teaching, but the only one thing which is common is that they always refer to the real. So the holes, they are either refer to real, or they are in the real. I would like to tell you about, for example, in the same 10th seminar, Lacan mentioned a central whole, a castrating whole, a phallic whole, a whole of the phallic desire. So for you to feel this is not just my imagination or hallucination to see holes everywhere, because there are so many of them and they are all different, but again they refer always to the real. And one of the questions which I asked myself for the last 2 months probably was like this: if we speak about the real in Lacanian terms, there are 2 different representations, contrast representations of the real in Lacan. I understand that I am saying really stupid thing, because there is no any representation of the real. That's exactly the opposite. So when we speak about the real, it's something unspeakable and something unimaginable. Anyway, when he speaks about the real, he used to speak either about the void, about the emptiness, or about hyper dense matter, so like a black hole in astronomy. So my question was to myself or to imaginary Lacan, I don't know, how is it possible to have holes in the void, in the emptiness? If something is empty, how could you drill a hole in this emptiness? And then I discovered his answer to my question. It was really very surprising. If you don't mind, I quote him, not to imagine things. So it is said, for example, the real is always full. That has an effect that sounds a little bit like what is said here, which lends credence to it, that of genuine Lacanism. Who speaks like that about the real? I do. The problem for me is that I never said it. The real is full of holes. So this idea that my question was empty, actually, because emptiness is the real is not emptiness. The real is full of holes. That's the answer of Lacan. And then I continue to say about different holes. For example, there is a hole in truth, and there is no full truth. Truth is never all. And one of my favorite Lacanian ideas is about not all, pas tout in French. So usually he says about not all, but at some point I discovered this idea that there is always a hole in truth. Don't try to catch it as a whole started from W. I'm sorry, well, you understand, whole without W and whole with a W. So what makes whole a whole in truth? The answer is sexuality, of course, because sexuality in Lacanian terms is impossible, and impossible is real. So I'm sure that everybody here knows this most famous phrase, les rapports sexuels n'existent pas. So why? The answer is because of the holes. And sexuality makes a hole in truth. That's a quotation from Lacan. So if we speak about truth, it's always with the hole. If we speak about knowledge, it's always a hole in the knowledge. It's also a Lacanian idea from the seminar number 14. He says, reality of whole introduces itself in jouissance, and jouissance is always like the other side of the knowledge, or what makes wholes in the knowledge. The really incredible thing is about the place, the birthplace of a subject, which is the dream navel. And what is it, the dream navel? For Sigmund Freud, we remember this metaphor of the mycelium, of the super dense, how do you call it? All these thoughts are together, and they're super dense. Don't try even leave it like this. Don't try to understand them, to interpret them. So for Sigmund Freud, it's more like the dark hole in astronomy. But for Lacan, he calls the point, nodal point where discourse forms a whole. That's exactly the dream navel. So the dream navel is also a whole, a whole where the subject, which is also a whole, born in a whole. And I'm also sure that everybody is here know the formalization of subject in Lacanian theory in terms of Borromean knot. So we have Borromean knot, like three circles, and objectia, object A in between them. And in fact, we deal with four holes. So the topological idea of a subject represented with just with several holes, or to be precise, more with four holes. And actually, in one of the latest seminars, which named RCI, Real, Symbolic, Imaginary, I discovered the new description of the Borromean holes. So Lacan says that the whole in symbolic is primary repressed, verdrängt. This is a whole for Lacan. The whole in the imaginary is the phallus as a gap in the body image, regardless of the gender. So imaginary is also a whole. And the whole in the real is an abyss between the sexes, articulating the formula les rapports sexuels n'existent pas. Sexual relations don't exist. Yeah. And as I mentioned already, I think which is combining three circles or three holes together is this object A, objectia, which is also a whole. And the most surprising probably thing is the big other, who is supposed to be the symbolic matrix or something which is symbolized. But in the seminar number 20, Lacan says the big other is a whole. So I come now to two other principal moments for my analysis of my experience, wholes of psychosis and wholes of melancholy. And when Lacan in the third seminar speaks about psychosis, he speaks about a hole, a rupture, a rent, a gap, which represent the external reality. So psychosis is a situation when we have a hole in, I don't know why do a show at Bergassen, but well, anyway, there is a hole in reality. And this is his idea of psychosis. And he borrows the Freudian notion for psychosis from the Wolfman case, which is Verwerfung. So this Verwerfung or foreclosure of the signifier is a whole, or to be more precise, as Lacan says, a pure and a simple whole in the reality. So psychosis drills holes in symbolic matrix, which is very close to my mind, to the idea of the Langoliers. And what is rejected in the symbolic reappears through this hole back from the real. And it seems like this hole is not the only one, and Lacan continues, due to the lack of metaphoric effect in psychosis, this hole will give rise to a corresponding hole in the place of a phallic signification. So this is also a crazy idea, like chain reaction. I mean, if we have one hole in the reality, it means that afterwards we will have very many of them. One provokes another one provokes another one, etc., etc. Sort of Langoliers eating the space and provoking other very many holes, let's say like this. And to my mind, when we deal with melancholy, I think the whole is different. I will try to explain now how, because, well, I have to confess that I disagree with many of my French colleagues who used to tell me that melancholy is one of the psychoses and it's the same Verwerfung, the same thing. But to me, it's not at all. The easiest way to explain is that these holes in the reality, in psychosis, they filled up with delirium or hallucinations. So they never empty. And when we deal with a hole in melancholia, it's, to quote Freud, it's an open wound. So it's impossible to fill it up with signifiers. And the most surprising idea, maybe, is that this is not a Lacanian idea, because in 1984, Sigmund Freud wrote a manuscript on melancholia, and he says that we have in melancholia das Loch im Psychischen. So, genau. Thank you very much. I finished with your genau. Yeah, thank you.
I think we can, one day maybe we can call you the founder of whole studies. It would be completely appropriate. Thank you so much. Wow. Das Loch im Psychischen, yes. First questions, August Roos. Yeah, please.
For the enlargement of the holistic theory. And it was for the first time that I realized that in English it's a Urwort, the whole. You know, the Urwort is used by Freud. The first words in the world in the history of mankind, they mean at the same time the two meanings, opposite meanings, and you have it in the uncanny, unheimlich. You have the heimlich and unheimlich and secret and overt, and this is the whole. In English is also such a primal word, and as such maybe it's a little bit clearer than what the Austrian writer Karl Kraus said once. The longer or the longer you look at a word, the stranger it looks back to you. And after your wonderful paper, I have lost the sense of whole for a moment. But I was curious also when you spoke of the novel of the dream by Freud. And I had an experience not very long ago that I was at his initial dream of Irma's injection. He was speaking of the novel, and the novel was the appearing of the formula of trimethylamine. And I said, well, it's a formula. It doesn't mean anything. And maybe you all know, but I didn't know that. What is trimethylamine? It's an awful, it's an awful stuff. The most smelling substance, more than ammoniac, or I don't know. And where is it found? In the vaginal secrets, and a little bit in the male, in the dry substance of the semen. So that is the whole of trimethylamine, and the novel is everything very much a realistic thing, a smelling. And this is sexuality in the real, maybe. One of the real dimensions.
Thank you so very much.
She wants to maybe respond.
Sexual substance, but I didn't know exactly that it is so smelly and okay. Trimethylamine.
For sharing.
Yeah.
Well, the smell is the first. The smell is the first sense, and belongs to a different part of the brain, right? That's why it's very special. It's a reptile brain, the smell. But I wanted to say that in my limited knowledge of Lacan, I always keep this phrase of him that the body, when he was asked about the body, he says, we are a bag of holes.
Bag of holes.
A bag of holes. And I think that these holes are liminal in nature. They are spaces that are liminal, and in that sense, it brings us back to the idea of threshold. And in specific terms, they are subjected to the catexis of the other and of oneself. So I think that this threshold idea comes back in the whole. And I heard once a physicist talk about these black holes that you have referred to, and I use the image also in one of my writing, because they say that in the black hole, the only thing that escapes is the ghost. These are the phrases of the physicist. So I think that this entry and the in and out of the hole is a liminal space of interest to psychoanalysis, and of course a lot of things happen there, right, in our history.
Well,
right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I don't think I'm planning to talk about reptilian mind or brain. Yeah, I remember MacLean theory, of course, with the reptilian mind, and for me, Homo erectus is more important. So it's not so much nasal holes, which are also of great importance. But while you were talking, I recollected an important thing from the Lacanian theory about objects A. One is oral, so it's a hole. Another one, I don't want to show it, it's anal, also a hole. And the third, in Lacanian discourse, it's regard and ears. So inside, outside, this our possibility to live, actually. And also, as you mentioned, I can't deny it, it's also nasal holes are important.
They carry a history.
Yeah, well, that's true. In terms of evolution, yes. Yeah. And thank you very much for bag of holes. It's very important contribution to the whole studies.
Victor, I have
Yes.
a question. I felt a little bit like August. I've heard the whole all my life, and then I thought, how does it work in other languages? You know, that you have that play, you're just a whole and then the whole in English. I don't know how, it doesn't work in German. A Loch und das Ganze doesn't work. Trou. You have the two and the trou, but it's not exactly... It's
No.
not exactly at that level. It is the closest I was thinking that would work is the play, of course, for, Lacan does on le réel, réalité réelle. Mais le trou, it's, you know, it's such an incredible game, an équivoque in English.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Russian, but in German it falls flat.
No, in Russian it doesn't work neither.
Exactly.
No.
It's incredible to me that it is that English brings forth this incredible.
Yeah. But also, it seems to me, Jean, thank you. It's in between languages.
Yes.
Vladimir Granov, who was one of the Lacanian students, once he said that unconsciousness is stuck in between different languages.
Yeah.
And when we say trou in French,
Yeah.
it's true in English.
Yes,
so
exactly.
it's more working in between the languages.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Arthur Goldschmidt said the same thing.
Oh.
That he says, you know, every language can do something that another language can't do, and so it sort of is in between
exactly.
them. And one last other little thing is just, if there are that many holes, do you think that that's why Lacan needed so many knots?
Well, yeah, I'm sure that you are right. Topology is not my cup of tea, but when he speaks about torus, it's about a whole. Actually, the most simple topological figure is a ring. Yes. So it's already a whole. Yeah. And it's a border between inside and outside.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
In topology, it's so many holes. Well, that's the only one thing which I know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank
you.
So maybe I continue here with the question about the holes and Lacan, because we have heard about so many holes. But for me, what is really the thing with the hole is that it's can easily change its form because it can become bigger and bigger, and the hole is becoming larger. And this is also which is so fascinating here with Stephen King, because they are eating the space is eaten, and the holes are getting bigger. And so my question is Lacan thinking about, because the hole has a structure, but is he also reflecting on this kind of changeability of the whole, which is inherent to a whole?
This is a wonderful question. I have two answers, one from Stephen King, another from Lacan. From Stephen King, of course, or from my own experience, it enlarges itself. It's not about some particular form, but it's about getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. And Lacanian idea, which I like even more, that one whole by means of a chain reaction produces some other holes. Mm-hmm. It's not about changing the form of one hole, but appearance of the other holes. So it's I don't know. It's all for real. I'm sorry. It's I try to love myself, but. It's not, in fact, it's not laughable when you really feel it. I mean, these holes around. Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Victor, sorry, I'm not an Lacanian expert, but how you described his definition of wholes, I had the idea that it reminds me somehow also that the characteristic of the whole is that it reminds me that it's a passage through. Something comes out of it, or something is eaten by it, and we don't know, or we cannot be prepared. Is that right? And it seems not only to change its form, it seems also in its function. The Freudian metaphor is maybe that we don't know what will come from it or what it will absorb. Is there some passage function in it, or
it's a very good question.
dynamic?
Monica, I don't think it's a passage because if it belongs to the real and in Lacanian and theory, it's not a passage, and there is nothing we could expect to pass through it. And when we were talking now, the first idea came to my mind was a tunnel, and then Slavoj Žižek's funny thing to say that, oh, there is a light in the tunnel, it's a train coming to you. Okay, so it's maybe this sort of metaphor. But when we speak about melancholy, it's an open wound, it's a hole. It's
nothing comes
this is
from
not
that.
a passage, no.
Nothing comes from that.
Nothing comes, no.
Thank you. I find a way to Lacanian thinking of psychoanalysis as a theory of the lack, because psychoanalysis is a theory of the lack, because man has no in opposite to other living existences, we have no ontological ground. And this means that we don't really exist. We never exist in an ontological way. We are always between. So we have no real place. In the imaginary, as the imaginary ego, we are not the picture of us. We are not here who's seeing, we are between. And in the symbolic signification, we are whether the letter or the phoneme, which are our name, nor the speaking of the name, we are between the enunciation and the enoncé. So it's from this point of view, the true is not very far away from this seeing our non-existence.
Yeah. Thank you very much. August, it's, well, we have different sorts of negativities, of course. One of them is Loch, manque, yeah? So another one is absence in a sense of a presence. It was very many talks about this symbolic absence. And the specificity of a whole is that always refers to the real. So lack, of course, it's not possible to, we are desiring beings, right? And we desire because we have lack. This is the principal Lacanian ideas. So we deal just with different negativities, let's say. Yeah.
Last question for you. No.
I mean, I'll try to make it quick then. I mean, I'm curious, maybe coming back to this idea of whether the whole is not actually an escape hatch. And I'm thinking actually in particular of another sort of Stephen King reference, but more to Kubrick's The Shining. And that's Danny at the end where he's trying to escape, you could say an all-devouring father. But he does so precisely by relating to the holes that he makes, namely his footprints, in a manner that allows himself to disappear. You know, so that in other words, it's precisely by assuming I mean, I have a reading of this, but you know, the whole as a present absence instead of an absent presence. You know, that actually assuming the concrete, you know, absence that's made by a whole, Daniel can slip, you know, the devouring father, that his footsteps as absent presences leads him to his absent presence, you know.
Yeah.
So that there's so that there's a way of relating to the, you know, I mean, it's an account of what I call the happy melancholic, so that you also have in the poetry of Baudelaire. But in other words, a way of appropriating melancholia in such a way that one actually assumes the place of one's absence in this way. But I mean, so I mean, I'm just wondering if there's not maybe, you know, a way in which one can you know, escape what I thought was the opposition that you drew, which was namely, on the one hand, an account of schizophrenia, which would be like in Kaiwa, where you actually have a space as a devouring whole, right? Versus then this sort of oral notion of like eating holes into the whole, into the horizon, into space. And that there has to be a way actually precisely of maintaining how does one differentiate the collapse of that difference.
Right.
And so when you were saying is, oh, well, the whole just expands. Well, if you know, you continue in that way, then it collapses into the homonymy in English between whole and whole. So in other words, one has to somehow concretely differentiate the absence of the difference in signifiers, which is a meaningless H, which makes a whole in language. So occupying the place of just the absent body of the signifier that doesn't then signify something other than, we could say, the whole that it makes in language, or the place of the true, or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you for this commentary, and well, I'm thinking now about Danny escaping devouring father by confusing him with the traces, right? So it's already a symbolic absence. So, but it's possible to confuse. It's possible to deceive the devouring father in this way. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.